Welcome, everyone, to the Unstuck podcast. I'm Heather.
I'm Cameron.
And we are headed home from work today and talking to you while we're doing it. Today, we're going to cover a topic that that's been something Cameron wanted to discuss for a while now, and something that he's really excelling at, way better than I am. And it's been an example to me of this principle. So, Cameron, you want to share?
Yeah, it's something I've actually thought about for a long time, and something that I think most people agree with, but still don't recognize how pervasive and a part of their life it is. And that is bitterness. And how bitterness is a cancer and a poison in every situation.
Why don't you give the definition?
Okay.
So, you could look up bitterness or bitter in the dictionary, but I don't think your definition goes against it at all. It just adds some context and some potency that I think is really beneficial.
I think it's pretty obvious. A lot of people could probably define it if they thought about it. But my definition is that bitterness is the feeling that you have a license or a right to multiply pain and suffering of any sort. So pain physically, pain mentally, emotionally, where you feel you have a right to it, and you may actually have a right to it.
Well, that's debatable, but you might actually have cause to be feeling the pain that you're feeling, and it's justified in that desire. But I don't know about right. I think that's a deep that might be a deep conversation, a philosophical conversation, but
I feel that while that's an obvious statement, and we can think of a lot of ways that we've seen it, where we don't seem to see it as obvious is a lot of for instance, I think it was almost 6 or 7, maybe even 8 years ago. Gosh, it was a long time ago. I just sort of stopped going on social media. It wasn't on purpose exactly. It first started with I stopped watching the news. And then I just found myself actually happier when I stopped the news. I did not feel less informed. And I would argue that the information you're getting from the news is probably not something you could actionably do anything about anyways. And so it was not doing you any good to know a lot of the information you had from the news.
Not so much like what's going on in the world, but it's all the opinions of what's going on in the world.
Especially pundit news, but even regular news, I gotta say, a lot of the information you get there is not something that you have to know, and I don't even know if it helps you. This is a debatable part.
It depends on your personality, because a lot of people obsess over it, and politics and things become their own religion.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I noticed I was happier when I just didn't watch it. And so then I kind of, again, Facebook I found, and social media platforms, especially at the time it was Facebook, I just found that I was never happy reading the news feeds. I felt a lot of the back and forth, the bitterness, the who could dunk on somebody else with a really good, quip or a meme, or just shred somebody's opinion, and who could do it back, and who can defend it really well, and just felt like a lot of strife, a lot of headbutting, and
for the likes and the comments you would get supporting it, but no one's opinion in any of those kind of conversations or debate is ever changed.
Correct.
It's just to show how right you are and get other people to say how right you are.
And this is where I think the subtlety of my definition of bitterness comes from. It's that by doing this thing, somebody, so for instance, if I had, maybe I was just, we could make it something simple, I'm part of an HOA or something like that, and they gave me some really stupid ordinance that I had to follow. And so I just went on a rant and posted a bunch of memes about how stupid HOA people were, and how ridiculous it was, and I was thinking, no, all the things I could have said could have been completely truthful to whoever was listening to it. could be completely correct. And and my situation could have been, they could have been putting some sort of truly onerous things on me. But my desire to take that right that I had from what they did to me, to then blast them, to then make my points and things like that. That was me trying to multiply some form of, say, of suffering and pain of some form, and it comes in more obvious forms too, right? I get angry. You see a kid who's angry at some other kid, they go and punches them and things like that. That's a bitterness that they held on to.
I think it's important though to point out, like, while you're doing that, you're not actually thinking, I want to multiply pain, and you're actually just wanting to point out and feel justified in your opinions. So it's not really like it's not like you're aware that you're doing it, but all that it is doing is causing that. I actually had that happen to me. Like, there was a yard sale page, like back when our kids were really little, where we lived, like forever ago, and prices were getting kind of really crazy, like for a yard sale page. And I remember making a comment on my social media, like trying to get the back pats and everything. And it ended up like offending somebody that I actually knew in real life, because she was in a difficult situation. She was one of the ones that was charging a lot. And like literally, like the friendship went away because I felt justified in like criticizing what was going on and making a deal of it. Like, for what? Like, what good did it do? It wasn't going to stop people from posting things that were really expensive. You know, or a proactive thing would have been to create my own page and my own standards for it, right? Mm-hmm. But I ended up just like ruining a friendship. I ruined a relationship. Now, obviously, it wasn't like a amazing friendly, but we were like decent friendly to each other, and it just kind of like it fractured after that. And I think like we're not even friends on Facebook anymore.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking like, wow, like that's definitely not what I intended, but that's what happens when we feel justified in making a big deal and sharing that bitterness with others, when there's no productive outcome that's going to come out of it other than, yeah, you're right, that sucks.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because that's one type of situation. And I know there's going to be people listening saying, yeah, but this horrible thing happened to me, and it's real. A real horrible thing that happened to me. But I'm going to make a case. And I hope that by the end of our discussion, it'll be strong enough to convince at least one person. Any form of bitterness you hold on to, any that you decide to use, is always cancer. It is always it is always poison. It will never cure anything.
Yeah.
It will always be poison. And I think that's really important to recognize, because there are situations where you are very much wronged. But I'm telling you, if you use bitterness to, I don't know what it is, it's this type of soothing, I think, where
it's validation.
I feel
it's validation.
Yeah.
Because the only reason you're doing it is to receive that validation from others saying, you're right, they're wrong, you're good, they're bad.
Well, what's interesting is it's not usually done privately, because it's privately, it probably won't have as much bitterness to it. It's usually done some sort of publicly.
But that still happens, and that's actually what I want to talk about. Like, because we'll talk about this principle, but I think it really like brings it home when we talk about our personal experiences.
Sure.
Why we're talking about that.
Okay.
Are you okay with me just going there right now?
Sure.
Okay. I think so. Cameron actually began practicing this way before any of like the disclosure for the porn happened, and like in the things that were bothering him in our relationship, in our marriage. He had decided, I mean, maybe I should let you talk about that. I know you're distracted trying to change lanes right now.
Yeah, but I can talk about it.
But yeah, like tell him a little bit about your decision and how that came about and how you started practicing.
Well, I think where I started really thinking a lot about bitterness is where I was feeling bitterness in our relationship. Heather and I at the time we've talked about this and we'll talk about this more, but we were very good friends before our marriage. And when we got married, we had this wonderful base of a friendship, but we hadn't built a really good romance. So what happened over the years
was, it's probably more intimate, like the right way to say that, because it's intimacy, intimate marriage. And that doesn't just mean sex, although sex is included. Intimacy is in being known and knowing and developing that deeper level that goes further than just friends. Although we did, I mean, it's not like we didn't, but we didn't really cultivate and grow that very well. We were like kind of like kids playing at it for a real long time.
Well, and then I had this hidden shame and pattern of pornography that I was dealing with that I wasn't letting her in on. And so what happened was eventually I started feeling a lot of resentment because a lot of our relationship was a romantic relationship, and especially in intimacy, sexual intimacy, we were kind of, I felt like we were lacking a lot. But I didn't feel like I could discuss it because I had this problem that I could not talk about, that I thought
added to the bitter feelings, right?
That I thought I could not talk about, which we talk about in a different podcast. We actually do talk a lot about in a different podcast about breaking the shame bubble. Definitely check that out. But so I felt very stuck. And I think a lot of people do get in some sort of stuck like this. If they might not be hiding something, they still feel stuck. And one thing that I realized, and this is about the time that we started doing a lot of more mindset stuff and
like group
mentoring and things like that. And I really started to realize that there's another principle that I'm going to talk about more in another podcast, but the principle of irregardless, that I realized that no matter what I wanted Heather to do, the only person I could control was me. And so that's where I started really thinking about bitterness and what was its purpose? How was this helping me? And I realized it wasn't. I realized that when I was listening to, say, a pundit that you really like, name a pundit. I'm not going to name any. You name any whatever news station you like, and they've got their people yelling at people and things like that.
Pick a pundit you like and just go from there.
Yeah, just pick any pundit. It didn't matter which one, because I found that it didn't matter which one I listened to, which side they were on. It felt like I was drinking poison every time I listened to them. And then I realized that bitterness, no matter its form, and resentment, anger, anxiety, any desire where I wanted to lash out at Heather, at the world, at things around me, that bitterness was always going to be poison. It was always going to hurt me, and anytime I used it, it just hurt others. And then in the end, I may feel some gratification as I exact it in the moment, but just like the addiction or the pattern that I was in at the time, every time when everything is over, you'll feel horrible.
Yeah, and it actually moves you further away from what you
want. And it actually, yes. So any goal you may have had that was beneficial, that was constructive, that was building, that was connective, you have now moved the pieces farther apart.
Yeah.
Every time we use
replaying with rounds.
And this is why I started to have a more passionate feeling about it. Well, it was wonderful in our relationship when we finally did have that tea day, that truth day, and I was able to tell Heather my pattern of pornography, and we talked about it, and it opened up this new world to us. I did feel like I could work on this bitterness even much, much better. Holding the shame inside. Shame is a wonderful way to make you feel really trapped in bitterness. But there's lots of ways to feel trapped in bitterness.
What was so interesting too was that, and this is a little bit beside the point, and we'll talk more about this later, but the very thing you were the most afraid of, which was disclosing that for me, actually ended up solving the things that you were so bitter and upset about.
Yeah.
Because what I was craving and missing was knowing you, and I didn't understand. I didn't understand what was going on, but I did understand that something wasn't quite right, and that I desperately wanted to know you better. So I just think it's interesting too, like how the
well,
so often what we want so much is
Yes.
so close, and we're just doing all the wrong things and pushing ourselves apart.
And it's even more insidious. It's I find that when I remove bitterness, and part of removing bitterness, we'll talk more about this, is to increase gratitude and hope. The increasing of gratitude and hope not only does it remove bitterness, I had a lot of times that I found I was receiving the thing that I thought I decided I definitely was not. For instance, and this happened before disclosure, before Truth Day, I made a little Google form, and I called it LL for love language, and I felt that my love language was touch, and that Heather was just not showing me touch, ever, hardly ever. So I said, okay, if I'm actually giving into this bitterness, I'm going to use a broad brush and say never happened. But if I'm going to try to lead into hope and gratitude, I'm going to count the times I actually see it, because I know it's happening. And really, what precipitated this, I think you gave me a hug or did something where that was really nice, and I realized it caught me off guard, and I was like, okay, this is happening more than I realize. I need to investigate what's happening. And so I made this form, and I started just recording every single time. She gave me a hug, we made love, she patted me on the rear as I walked by, something cute like that, every single time. And I started realizing that it was just happening way more than I thought it was. And it kind of confirmed that to me. I in fact used that form in a Valentine's.
And I ruined it because right after disclosure.
Oh yeah, she broke the curve. Well, we'll get to that.
No, because like right after disclosure, in my insecure moments, like I would sometimes look at his phone because I was
Oh,
scared.
that's right.
And I remember like, what is this? And I looked through it. I'm like, it was like the best thing to find in one of those snooping phases, because I was like, well, you know, and it was, I'll just say, like, as a little side note to this story, that in my desire to regain trust and believe you that you actually, because like you go through all these emotions of like, does he really care? Is this all a lie? Like all the things. So to find something like that obviously you weren't wanting me to find, like it wasn't there for me to find. It wasn't like a dangling bait. And it had started well before it's not like you started it after I found out. No, you know, so this had started, the dates were there, it was all logged. So to find something like that to show like he really was trying to make those connections and trying to be forgiving and charitable towards my, you know, the things that he wishes was different. Like that was really meaningful to me to find something like that. Like not every wife gets that, to be that lucky, you know. Sometimes they'll actually find what they're afraid of finding. And I sit there and I got a really beautiful Google form that with all the little things that he noticed. So that was nice. I just, you know, thank you for that.
You're welcome. So it was this kind of experience, though, that I really feel like more people should delve into. Because I also noticed in our own arguments, I would be accused of something, and it felt galling because, like, I know that's not true. But I could tell that it was coming from anger and bitterness. From Heather's side sometimes, and from my side sometimes it would be from anger and bitterness. Once you get into that anger, you know what it is. That those blinders will say mean things. I call it nasty town. Once a discussion goes from hey, I really don't like what's going on here, to you're horrible, and these are all the things I dislike about you, and just totally going to every single personal thing you can think of. I call that nasty town. It's just, you're done. That's bitterness, and the discussion is no longer discussion. It's just a fight.
Yeah. So let's talk about this whole thing from my perspective, because as I mentioned in the beginning, you're doing way better at this than I am. And I still struggle. One of the things, I don't like calling it betrayal trauma, but like, in all honesty, it was very traumatic and disorienting to believe that I had something one way and security.
Disorientation sounds.
Yeah, disorienting. Yeah. Is security in my marriage, which wasn't, and because of our faith, like it wasn't just for an X number of years or a lifetime. This was eternity. And then I had some religious programming that, while well-meaning, really set it up in my mind. And I'm not even saying that this is intentional or how it's meant to be, but in my mind, like, if you view pornography, you're this type of a person, and it wasn't ever good. Like, this is bad. You should avoid it at all costs. If you marry someone with this problem, you're in for trouble, right?
Yeah.
And so I, finding out, and really believing that we had the kind of relationship where he couldn't keep that from me, he would respect me enough to talk to me about it. Like, it threw me for a loop. And you know, and that is like, that's a broad sweeping way to describe it, because it was so much more complex for him. He was literally terrified to tell me, afraid he'd lose everything. So there's a whole other side to that. But from my perspective, it was just like my world was upside down. I didn't know it was black and white. I didn't know it was true. I didn't know for our whole lives in marriage and relationship, like what was actually true. And it was very difficult in those, especially in those first few weeks and months. And then as it's gotten further and further out, I have moments where I feel the turmoil again and the disorientation again. So what I wanted to bring up was, there's one thing, that bitterness in the form of, I'm irritated by something, or you're not acting the way I want you to, and I wish you would act differently. You know, those common things that you have inside of any relationship, right? And you can use like the, we're not having enough sex type thing, right? I'm irritated by it. That's not I feel like my life is literally like hanging in the balance and at risk type of feeling. It's an irritation. So for me, dealing with the trauma of everything that happened, I literally felt, it sounds so stupid to say out loud. And I'm like, and I know people might not understand it. And unless you've been through it, it might not make sense. But at least for me, it felt like I was so scared that everything I had built was crumbling away, and that I would be destroyed if it got worse, or if all the ifs, right? Like, I literally felt like I had the potential to be destroyed completely. Now, that's a lie, because no matter what happened, no matter how bad it actually was, if there was worse lies that I was going to find out or anything like that, I actually wasn't going to be destroyed. But it didn't matter. It felt that way. That felt true. And so my form of bitterness was literally came out in the perspective of like, I'm fighting for my life. That's what it felt like. So I'd have a lot of control over we discuss a lot. We would talk about it, and then sometimes there'd be hurt feelings. And then it would just like get to this tipping point of, there's too much. I can't handle it anymore. And I'm just now scared, and it's like fight or flight response. And so it would come out as an attack to hurt you. And then I would feel justified, because I'm hurting. It's your fault that I'm hurting. So it's okay that you're hurting right now, because I'm needing to deal with this. And to be completely honest, and transparent, I'm working on this, but there are some moments where it feels like it crashes down for the first time again, and I'm in that mode. And so how to get out of that? I don't know that I have all the answers for that yet, but one that I have been working on is gratitude. Also, by identifying what we're grateful for, we're able to shift the focus from what we don't want and being scared, to the things that we do want, and realizing what we already have. But in addition to that, it's also forming trust within myself and understanding that I am my own individual, and that the marriage isn't part of me. It's something that I create along with Cameron. It's its own separate entity. It's It's like a business.
That is a
right?
really important piece of that.
Yeah.
And just to do a quick sideline, I want you to finish, but quick sideline, I really like what you just said right there, is that it's really important to remove yourself in these type of situations and recognize that there's yourself in all situations, and that's you, and there's yourself. And then if you're with somebody else, or you're talking to somebody else, or you're working on something with somebody else, and that thing you're working on, be a relationship, project, a sale of something, that's a separate thing. So if something happens to that
You can
thing,
pour your heart into it, but it's not you.
correct.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you have to like what happens to it either. If something is not happening something that's happening that you don't like, but remember, it's separate. Go ahead. That there's me, Heather, and marriage. It's not. If I'm doing something that's messing up the marriage, I can still be separate from it, and recognize that I need to fix this part of it without it having to mean that it's an identity part of somebody else.
Yeah. And so as I'm dealing with these emotions that bubble up and like sometimes become so much, what I'm trying to work on inside of myself is self-compassion for it happening. In the pornography addiction recovery world, I'm in the very, one of the very first things I was told in support after everything, was brought to light was that, relapse is common. It doesn't, it's part of the recovery. And so I'm trying to remind myself that I'm dealing with my own struggle. Just like you had your struggle, I'm dealing with my own. And so if I relapsed into nasty town and bitterness, to have compassion and what am I learning? What set me off? What are the things that happened this time so that I can watch for them and then have a game plan and an action step to avoid it the next time. So I'm trying really hard to have self-compassion over it. And then also what we do, we don't let it fester. We don't ever walk away from each other and let it be a days long battle. We really do resolve things pretty quickly. And that as a large part to him, because he'll sit there patiently and let me go through it. And I've said to him before, I'm like, it feels so unfair sometimes. He had his battle privately for so long. The back and forth, the fight with himself to do better, you get a little bit better and then you relapse. And I'm like, it really is interesting to me, the parallel between my struggle with this and how your pornography pattern brought out of me my insecurities and my holes that I need to fix. And so they're different things completely, but they're both things that are they were deficiencies inside of us that needed resolving. And so yours brought out mine, it magnified mine because I was pushed to a limit where now I'm struggling with this. And so just that self-compassion, also the fact that you were, patient with me. And I'm recognizing while he went through his privately, I didn't see that battle. And he did not, we say he didn't relapse, but Cameron had been quitting for 20 years or longer.
Basically.
Right? So he relapsed a million times, just not during the time frame that I knew about it. And so my relapse is a lot more seen than his was. And so I think I don't know if that plays a part in your patience with me sometimes.
Yeah. But again, I've thought a lot about this, and it is my personality. I'm a laid back kind of personality. And so, and I'm empathetic. I'm kind of an empath in a lot of things. I don't. That's one reason why I never liked the pundits, is because I could feel the grottiness of making fun of someone else and liking it. I could feel that. But I started to realize things a while ago, and I don't think it's widely thought of. It's just how pervasive it is, how much it becomes, it's a part of our lives.
Bitterness.
Yeah. And even recently I've redoubled my efforts because I I felt it coming back again. If you hurt my feelings, if you lash out, and I could feel myself saying, well, I can't say anything because I did this thing to her. And then the other part of me is like, well, I don't have to sit here and take it either. You know what I mean? And then I could feel the bitterness kick in and say, well, you have a right to it. And that's where it starts. It really does start to, you have a right to this.
Yeah. And it's like how I was saying that, like, you hurt me, so it's okay that you're hurting right now because I have to deal with this. And the thing is, like, none of those episodes ever make it feel better.
No.
In fact, it's like harder afterwards. Now, we've built some foundation that has helped us fix it. And I think there's some understanding and just like, there's also a healing period that we're still in.
Yeah.
Not to excuse it, but like we've done the work to help us bridge the gap when those things happen. Just like if you're dealing with relapses in pornography viewing or any other addictive behavior, as you're working together with your spouse or with the person that you're trusting to help you, like you figure things out to deal with those rough patches because we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes.
Yes.
And I think just, having compassion for yourself and for the other person helps. It also, like, for me, it's been really helpful to see the parallels in what I'm dealing with and what he's dealing with. Because as much as, like, I'm justified in saying that what he did behind my back was hurtful, what I'm doing in front of his face is hurtful. When I'm leaning into that bitterness and I'm focusing on my fears instead of my hopes.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think, and this isn't my personal answer to bitterness, is increasing hope and compassion and gratitude.
Yeah.
If you can in those moments do that, I believe you can pop that bubble of bitterness, just like you can pop the bubble of shame by pulling it out in the open, taking bitterness and adding hope and gratitude and compassion. I think it will pop it.
And sometimes humor. Like the other night, I was struggling, and this was our weekend anniversary of everything that happened, and like from the beginning, I was told, like, the body has memory, and so you might go through some deep emotional swings during that anniversary. And people have that happen, and they're not expecting it, and it's like the body remembers even if the brain's not thinking about it. And so I did experience some emotionally. We did things to combat it, and, we talked about it, and I don't think it was as terrible as it could have been, but we had a few rough moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of those moments, we made a decision to, and it's like, be the first one to just solve it.
This is one of the hardest parts about what I'm trying to advocate.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can be in a situation and some people will have very, very grievous things happen to them. But where I'm talking the more subtle times where you're in a fight with someone and you're more wronged than you've wronged them. You just know they're more wrong. So you do not want to be the first one. But all it takes is one of you to say sorry. One of you to come to the table with an olive branch. One of you to show compassion and love. It just takes the one of you, but it's not going to be you. And so anyways, that's kind of where we were.
So, like, I was just really struggling. I don't think we were fighting, but it was more some hard feelings that I was expressing, right?
Yeah.
And and so he was diffusing. So he walks out of the bathroom wearing like a ridiculous outfit, and it immediately made me laugh. And then we had something else to focus on because we like took pictures of like it was just funny and stupid. Like, I had bought some new clothes, and he was like, they were as ill-fitting as they were. He was like put on some of them and stuff, and so it was just really silly, and it diffused it like immediately. It didn't solve everything, but it diffused the moment because you chose out of bitterness and you chose to look at what you wanted. And that was deeper connection, showing care and love and compassion, and it worked. And so But that is not an easy task, especially when you feel like you are right. But I think that's the key, is like, if you have the emotional intelligence, and you know what, you might have it sometimes and not in others. And so like, just know that. But if you have the ability to step outside of it and just look at what you are actually trying to achieve, and unless you're trying to achieve like on purpose to hurt somebody and to like shred them apart, then what you're doing, if it's causing that pain, isn't like, you're already off course. So how do you redirect it? How can you take that first effort? And who doesn't love if you're in that middle of a hard moment and somebody says, you know what, you're right, or I'm really sorry, or just like that expression, like even if it's not your fault, but somebody says, I'm sorry and I care about you and I want to help, from a place of actual love and commitment, and desire to do better. Who doesn't appreciate that? You know what I mean?
So I'd like to wrap up today with a story that I find very poignant, and it's about a person who had something happen to them that was really horrible. And I believe most people would believe that if you were in their circumstance, you would have a right to some pretty strong bitterness. And the story you can find in a movie called Just Let Go from 2015.
There's also like a YouTube video with them sharing the story, and then we'll link an article about it too in the notes.
Yeah. And the gentleman, his name is Chris Williams, who, while he was driving one day
with his wife, his pregnant wife, and a 3-year-old daughter,
got into a head-on accident with a 17-year-old who was a drunk driver. Killed all of his family except for him. And the drunk driver lived. And the story is remarkable because he, from the outset, openly forgave this young man. And they are now friends even to this day.
Well, not only are they friends, but they travel together to schools.
Yeah.
To talk about their experience to prevent it from happening again. And I wonder, Cameron, if this story hits home a little bit for us, because this just occurred to me. It's not easy. It's not easy to forgive. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Because it's not so much about just saying, it's letting go of the pain and letting God deal with it, letting God take it, letting the atonement heal. And it's not an easy thing to know how to do. It's not like this thing you hold and you just hand it over one day and then it's gone. It's like this emotional, mental burden that you have to figure out how to let go of without holding something, letting go. I don't know how else to describe it than that. And what I love about their story is that not only is it inspiring that he was able to forgive and like extend that grace to that boy who was horrified, right? Like this kid felt so bad. He had made a really dumb mistake that so many people do every day and they escape the consequences of. He didn't. And so not only was he able to extend that grace and save that boy by offering forgiveness and helping him have purpose with his life to go and share and help others avoid similar destruction and consequences from choices. But they went out and publicly shared it. And there's something like about your pain that feels really private. And you don't always want it exposed. It's very unnerving to expose it. And so for us, like, we're dealing with that right now. Like, this is not a comfortable thing for us to go and talk about. There's this in fact, just recently I was like, why are we doing this? Like, why do I want to share this difficult situation and like break any illusion that people might have of what our relationship actually is? And not only with those that we know personally, but like, who knows how far this will go, right?
Right. And that really is the answer, is that when you can remove bitterness and increase love, compassion, hope, you bring joy into your life in places that were unexpected.
And how many lives have they saved because this story, like you're just so, you can't help but be enamored by it. Right. And so I think that's something we're hoping, like the fact that we were so surprised how our relationship could change so very quickly and become so much better, even in the midst of some hard things that are still ongoing, some hard moments that hurt really bad. But our relationship, like if you could rate it from before till now, is drastically different.
We've talked about it.
Even with all the downfalls.
We feel like we had just been pretending, playing house before compared to where we are now.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're just learning more and more all the time.
So if you want to be inspired, we encourage you to click on the link, like search this story out, watch the movie. It's an incredibly inspirational, it's not just a story, it's a real life man and boy, or I guess he's a young man. This is a while ago, making a difference and using pain and sorrow and their suffering and forgiveness and the removal of bitterness, like to change the world. I love that.
Well, now I would like, before we go, and Heather and I were talking about this, I really would like to have some sort of thing we can kind of give you to do after each of these podcasts, each of these discussions we have with you.
These principles can be meaningful and like be meaningful to you, not just something that worked for us.
Right. And I think I would like to talk about how is bitterness. I would like you to look up in your life, and as homework, just look in your life and dig deep. Where is bitterness affecting you in your life? Where is holding you back from happiness? Where is holding you back from extending love and sympathy?
And the way you can find this, because that might be like, oh, I don't know. Like, I don't know what that is where are you feeling like a victim? Like somebody has wronged you, something has wronged you. And it could be your job, it could be a relationship, it could be God, right? It could be anything where you're feeling like it's not fair, I deserve better, or it shouldn't have happened this way. That's festering inside and it's unresolved. So identify what it is that's still holding you back.
And I also think it will show up in places where you think you have a right to something. So for instance, if you're part of a group, a political discussion group where you're making fun of another political group and things like that, those type of things, that is a form of bitterness as well.
Yeah, where the I'm right, you're wrong, and there's a distinct line without any empathy or ability to understand the other side.
Correct.
And that I'm pretty conservative and religious, and so I did this exercise with abortion once because I'm very much pro-life, and I used to take a very hard stand on people that would have an abortion until I started looking into the other side. And so I'm telling you, if there's a definite wrong, even if you are standing on like a religious,
this didn't change your views, but it helped change your perspective on people and give compassion to them.
So don't write off the situation. This is why I'm mentioning it, just because you have like a moral ground that you're standing on. If there's ever anything that's like, nope, you're wrong, completely wrong, and you're othering somebody else, I think is what you're talking about. So those are great scenarios to investigate as you're coming up with just one area. It doesn't have to be everything. Don't overwhelm yourself. But one place where you feel like you are owed something or you're right and they're wrong. So once you have that identified, the next thing to do, and this is something that I was thinking about earlier and I didn't mention, where do you have ownership in that? And I think that was a key component for both of us, Cameron. With the bitterness discussion, early on, even before disclosure, you decided to focus on what you could control. And then right after disclosure, what turned things around for us was my decision to focus on what I could control. And so I think this is a key component to healing and advancement in your life, no matter what.
Recognizing that you're the only place. This isn't something you get to choose. It is the only place you get to control anything in your life is yourself.
Yep.
Everything else you influence. And if you're good at it, you can influence things very powerfully. but you never get to control somebody else. You can compel somebody else, but in the end, they still don't do what you want.
It's not real.
And only through compel.
Yeah, it won't be actually what you want. So find where you have influence and control, and identify where that is, and just investigate it, journal it out, pray, meditate, figure out what that looks like for you. So that's step 2. Step 3 is find one action step that you can do right now to influence what you want. So an example of that was Cameron coming out dressed silly in an argument to dispel it, or to diffuse the situation and help me feel better. It might be also like what he did with the Google Doc or Google form, right? Now maybe you're starting to collect evidence of how you're wrong, right? In a relationship. It doesn't matter. We don't want to prescribe it for you. And in fact, I just encourage you to check in with your own intuition. And and for those in the religious realm that might identify more with my beliefs or our beliefs, use the Spirit to guide you. What can I do? Pray and ask God, what can I do to use that influence? So you've already identified it. What can I do to use that influence to influence the outcome in the direction that I would like it to go? It reminds me of the movie, it's the Christian movie with the couple. It's Kirk Cameron movie.
Oh.
Fireproof. Where his marriage is falling apart and he decides to just keep doing what he can, and it's not working, and it's not working, and it's not working, and he gets is really frustrated, but eventually he is able to make progress because he didn't give up, because he kept in control of what he could control. So the homework is identify the area where bitterness is affecting your life. Identify the control that you have, what influence you have in it, and then take an action step to influence the outcome that you want. And just watch what happens. And, I would if you have an experience that's really cool, please share it with us. We would love, like I said a minute ago, this is scary for us to do. We're putting our personal lives out there for, I don't know who's going to see it. Maybe it's not very many people. Maybe it's a lot of people, but it would be so meaningful to us to know if something that we're sharing is helping your life. So please do share in the comments, or let us know, send us a message. We're really excited to know how these things are helping you, because we know they've drastically improved the quality of our life and our relationship. And so we're grateful to spend our drive home with you. We're about to go through a car wash. We won't do that with you.
Nope.
But thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.